So good morning,
Baby steps,
everybody.
baby steps, baby steps.
So I could not be more excited today to do this interview with Fran. Fran's one of my favorite people, and as Rachel, who's her daughter, said, she goes, Shrag, I don't understand. She says, you're of one genre, my mom's of another genre. How can you two be such good friends? What do you guys talk about all the time? And then she's like, wait, you guys are like the same person. So Fran is a ball of energy, and Fran, very much like myself, could walk down the street and have 5 different conversations with 5 different people, and she probably didn't know any of them 30 seconds ago. She has built an incredible business for herself. And if you look at somebody who is very strategic, tactical, and really talks about providing somebody an actual service, right? And we always talk about, can you quantify what your agent does? I don't think there's one client that's ever worked with Fran that can't say that she didn't work. From showing up with staging homes to the way they show the homes, the way they talk about homes, the presentation she gives. Fran's going to kind of peel back her curtains and share what I think of one of the most incredible things that she shared with me is how, and this is where we're going to start out. How do you never negotiate a home inspection when representing a seller? She goes, I don't negotiate. And I said, hold on a second. I've been doing this a long time ago. What do you mean? And I'll tell you a quick funny story about Fran. And when I met Fran, she was completely down to earth, right? I actually had somebody hit my mailbox and I ghosted her on her initial call. And I'm like, this lady's never going to want to work with me. Right. So I call her up, so understanding and everything else. I signed her up and someone said, I believe it was Ethan, it was like, you hired Fran Mazer? And I'm like, what? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, do you know they built her an office in Syosset? And then I would talk to a few other people and I called her up. I said, who are you? Are you like Kaiser Sose? Like you have this hidden identity? People talk about you like you're this out of the world person. Tina, Daddy's on a call. There you go. Go. So in doing this, I got to know Fran, and she's quite an interesting character. So I want to jump in and share some of the things that she's done to be really successful. I want her to share how she took 22 listings in the first 2.5 weeks that she was at Compass. And Fran has agreed in this conversation to share all that she does. Any questions, any answers, she's happy to do. So Fran, just introduce yourself quickly and a little bit about your team.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Fran Mazer. I work on the North Shore of Long Island, specifically in the Woodbury area, our offices. And I'm doing this about 20 plus years. And I came from a background of design went to FIT and designed kids' clothes for 25 years in merchandise. And the one thing I learned along the way, whether I was doing a presentation for girls' dresses or I was doing it in houses, the one thing I learned along the way is I say it all the time, it's all in the presentation. It's all how you present. So as I was doing my career, I realized, just to address Shrag's first question, that we'd get the offers on the homes, especially when it wasn't a seller's market, or even if it is a seller's market, and the buyers would want to renegotiate the inspection, and it would either blow up or there'd be problems. And I decided that I didn't want to do it that way. And before I became an agent, I looked for a home myself for 3 years. It's probably a realtor's worst nightmare. And what I discovered in those years is I didn't think that most of the agents were prepared. You go into a house and sometimes, if the listing agent wouldn't be there and the buyer's agent didn't know anything about the house, and you'd ask a million questions and they would get back to you. That was the answer you got. I'll get back to you. And it just stuck with me in my business. If I had to do that to my clients, I would be out of business. So I decided early on that I was going to come up with a little sheet. I call it my cheat sheet. And when I go on a listing, MLS only gives you certain specifics that you can put in, but they don't give you the years, the ages, the condition of everything in that house. So early on, when I went on a listing, I would sit with the client and we would fill out a sheet. And now, since I've been working with Chirag, he's gotten me much more organized, and we really developed the sheet. And from A to Z, I write down the years of everything in that house. So when I'm walking through a house, And as I said earlier, it's all in the presentation. Instead of walking through the house and say, this is the living room, when I walk through a house, I try to tell a little story about the house. I try to fit it into what the buyer might be looking for. And as I'm walking through, I initially would start telling them the years and the condition and everything of the house. And when they would make an offer, I would refer back and I would say, before I present the offer, I want you to make sure you understand, outside of things we can't see, like termites, which actually you can see, but termites or an active leak, um, we are not renegotiating. And it is the best thing I've ever done, and it works 98% of the time. I mean, it just works. And so now, with Shrug, you know, we have made a buyer's book, and in my buyer's book, I include this A to Z sheet. And when the buyer leaves the house, I ask them to please review everything, and if they're interested in making an offer, review everything, and then call me back. And that's what I do.
Okay, so hit yes in the chat box if you just got something new that you know you're going to start doing. I see Natalia raising her hand.
And it's
Everyone
interesting.
should be hitting yes.
The
There it goes.
sellers love it. They're like, wait, I have to give you the years of all of this. And I'm like, and if it's old, I'm like, listen, you know, it's better that the buyer knows up front. We were on a listing yesterday, actually, and the buyer was, I like full disclosure. I said, yeah, well, you know, when you're walking through 6 houses in a day, that buyer isn't going to remember every age of everything. But if they like the house and they walk away with this A to Z list, and they can review it, they're going to be hard pressed when the inspector comes in and you write in your listing the roof is 25 years old, and if the inspector comes in and says, well, the roof is at the end of life, well, guess what? You know what I say to them? Yeah, I know, and you already knew that.
Yep. So look,
Works.
what's really interesting about this, right, is if you talk about it's all in the presentation, there's another part that I discovered in doing this, what's so important is we all want to know how we're different, right? And it goes to the saying, like, no one will ever remember what you said, but they'll always remember how they made you feel. Fran, when you're going through and taking the time to really learn about somebody's house like that, what is that rapport and what's that connection like that the sellers leave with?
Well, for me, the rapport is the whole thing. So I try to find out if it's my own buyer, then I know what they're looking for. And I have been in houses that are not my listings. And when I go through a house, you know, I start talking about, like, if they are, you know, they might tell me, oh, you know, I have a huge family and we do all the holidays here, and, you know, I need a big dining room. And so when I'm going through a house, along with pointing out maybe some of the finish and things like that, I try to tell a story of them in that house. Like, can you imagine sitting in this dining room at Thanksgiving? Or can you look at this backyard? You know, you're all about the yard, and you try to tell a story about what they need. Now, when I'm the listing agent, which more times than not I am, because I consider myself more of a, listing agent. What I do when I get the call or when they come in, I try to start asking some questions. So it's always about asking the questions. I sometimes ask the agent ahead of time, what's your buyer looking for? And if you really know nothing about that buyer, then I create a story of a house. Maybe it's my story, but I create a story of a house so the buyer can visualize themselves in there, instead of just, here's your living room, it's got wood floors, great. Okay, what do you need me for? Like, make them need you, put an importance of why they might need you. I mean, my biggest, I think the biggest thing that I do is, maybe because I come from a design background, I love when they go in and they go, oh, I hate the cabinets, I hate this. And I start like designing the house for them. And so if you do have that skill and you know that a wall can come down, or can you just visualize this kitchen with the cabinets going to the ceiling and painted white. If you create a little bit of a story for them, I find it's very helpful than just walking through a house. Can't hear you.
So we talk about connection, right? So as you're going through this, I'm a buyer, right? Now let's talk about the objections people have. Now you give me all this stuff. And a lot of it, like you said, it's in the presentation, right? So there are two schools of thoughts. One, it's like what you'd share with the buyer, right? But also, like, there's a saying that says ADR, agents don't read, right? You could put all this in an email and everything else. For the people that are really going to want to get tactical, and I know people, we're going to get an inflood of things like, what does this look like? How do I do it? How do I share it with an agent? Now, make pretend I'm an agent. How would you communicate this with me so that I actually shared it with my client in a meaningful way that doesn't cause a problem down the road?
So as far as, are you talking about as far as my little cheat sheet? Or
So
are you
the
talking
goal
about?
is the goal is not to renegotiate, right? So if I'm the agent, I'm going to say, Fran, you know what? Everything's disclosed to you. Everything's disclosed to you. I want to make sure that your client knows the age of the boiler, the roof, and everything. And based on the home inspection, we've disclosed everything up front. We're not going to renegotiate based on any of these terms. How do you go about saying that to the agents so they communicate it to their clients in a meaningful way?
So when I leave, I give the buyer this book, and I'm happy to share what we create, which I think is really powerful, and we're getting tremendous response on it. And I also offer one for the agent if they want. And if they don't take it, I say to them, listen, everything is in here, full disclosure. If your buyer is interested, have them make an offer. Make sure you go through it with them so you see the ages of everything. My seller is not renegotiating unless it's a structural problem, if there are termites, or if there's an active water leak. I have to tell you something, it works. It just, they go, okay. They go, okay. And when they come back and they give me, I've had times where they'll come back and they'll say, oh, but the engineer said the roof, or I love when they say the driveway. They walk down the driveway, it's broken up. And then they go, but the driveway needs to be done. I go, yeah, and you walked on it 3 times when you saw the house. So, it's, you just have to tell them up front. I tell them up front after they show the house, after I give them the info, after I give them my book. And I say, if you're interested, review the book. And I don't make a big deal with the buyer so much at that point. I'll talk to the agent and I'll say, go over it with your buyer because we don't renegotiate. So if you're making an offer, make sure it reflects what they think they need. And it really works. And the sellers love that it used to be years ago, they'd be, price the house 30,000 higher, 50,000 higher. They're going to try to get me down with the engineer inspection because my burner's old. And I'm like, you don't need to do that. Let's price it where it belongs with the old burner. And let's tell them how old it is. And I'm always willing to have them come back if they want someone to inspect something or give them a price on something. I find it's really a clean way of working. The seller loves you because there's no nickel and diming. And I think the agents respect you because they can say to their buyers that they could put it on me and say, listen, come up with your price. Here's the book. Here's how old everything is. And help them come up with an offer that makes sense for them.
What you said is make them need you, right? Because look, if you guys want to talk about needing somebody, nobody wants to do this, right? But people don't understand, Fran, right? Like what an agent actually does. And
Right.
Michael made a great point, and we talked about this when we made these books. Look, for all of you guys putting these books out, if you don't think this is a form of lead generation, you guys are all nuts. Because I can share with you when I was an agent how many times people met me at open houses, and because of a conversation I had, they'd call me a month, 2 months later when their thing stalled out. Look, it's in preparations, it's in details, it's how you show up, it's being thoughtful, right? So
Yeah.
like when you hear it, what are some of the comments you get from the buyers that go through the house?
So it's been amazing, especially now with the book that, you helped us put together. I mean, mine was sort of like the raw version of that. We have gotten buyers coming into open houses saying, I don't like this house, but I can't believe that this is the information you give out. When we're looking, we want to work with you. I've had neighbors, not during COVID, but I've had neighbors come into open houses and see the presentation and have come in pretending that they were looking for their kid, which we all know they're not, and have hired me. You know, I've had buyers coming in. I don't know whether they're working with other people or not, but that have called me and they were really impressed with the professionalism. And so I think you get it both ends. I think the sellers love it, and I think the buyers appreciate it.
So here's a good example for everyone too, right? When we all talk about what's our unique selling proposition, real estate's a very commoditized business. You know, you could all very easily say, like Fran does, one of the benefits of working with me is we have a strategy that does not allow a buyer to renegotiate a home on an inspection. Does that instantly make you different than anyone else? Because before I met Fran, I've never heard this in my life, right?
They love it. I say it on a listing presentation and they go, well, what do you mean? And I show them my little cheat sheet. And I said, we're going to fill this out. You know, if you choose to hire me, we're going to fill this out. Your buyer, every buyer will have this information about your house. It is discussed prior to an offer. It is discussed when the offer comes in. And it really minimizes drastically all of that, you know, because what I'm finding in this market is buyers will say anything to get a house because the houses are going up, 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 and the bidding wars are fierce. And we had it on one of our houses that a buyer came in and he like blew everyone else away, like a ridiculous number. And, you know, he came in direct and I called him and I said, okay, you know, that's great. You know, let's go over the house. And you received my book when you came to the open house. Did you review it? And then he was like, what? You know, and so then after I went through everything with him, he backed out. He totally backed out. He was just using it. You know, they feel like if they bid up to get the house, that once you're involved with them, the seller's just going to agree to give them, you know, whatever they want to bring it back down to where it should have been. So I feel like it keeps the playing field really even and it really eliminates all of those games.
That's good. Now I want to go through. We have a slew of questions. So I'm just going to ask you one other thing, and then I'll open it up
Sure.
to Q&A. Is look, from the time I met you till now, I think I've pretty much turned what you knew as a house and a business upside down, flipped it over on its side, and rebuilt it to a different house, right? But even down to your presentation style, like, look how successful Fran is. The one thing I could say to her about her is she's very coachable, right? And someone asked me, how do you define that? It's like people who are uncoachable ask why, people that are coachable ask how. And I just want you to share quickly in the shift you've done in asking questions and being a better listener. And look, this is someone who's been getting listings on and on and on for years. How has that changed the experience of people and overall, just like a tip you could share with everyone about that?
Well, you know, I always considered myself an empathetic listener. And so when we really discussed it and we put a name on it, I said, you know, I think I do that. But now I'm really more aware of it. You know, now I'm more aware of the listening, and the questions are so important. And the one thing that I think that from you turning everything upside down, one of the biggest things that I feel is sometimes you do have your agenda. You want to get out there. You're on the listing, you're on a roll, you want to get it out there. But sometimes what they're saying, you don't tend to hear, and you just roll on with what you want to show. And I think by stopping and really, we actually had this yesterday on a listing, you know, we were going on the listing and this seller was really like stuck on his price. You know, we wanted to move on to something else. And until we kind of like stop, you know, you have to stop and really hear what they're saying and really ask why, you know, what's so important about that. And so that's what I would say. You know, the listening and the questions. Having all the materials in the presentation gives you a vehicle to ask them. For me, to ask them all the questions and find out what's important. And it also just makes the process a lot smoother.
Be a great question asker, be a great listener, be inquisitive, learn and know more about your clients' homes than anyone else does. Learn how to convey that in a meaningful way. So look, I left ample time. We have another like almost 10 minutes for questions before we kick it over to Coach Ethan for role play. Let's see what we have here, Rachel. So does anyone have a question? Pop it in the chat box.
Well,
So what I
everybody's
want,
asking if we can share Fran's cheat sheet. And yes, we'll send it out after and post it with the resources from today.
by the way, what I want to share with everyone, do you see that silence we had there that was maybe about 20 seconds? That's a closing technique, right? Like imagine if you just quiet for 20 seconds, you get people to think it sounds like an eternity. So if no one has any questions, I'm gonna keep going with my questions, right? So Fran, for people getting started that want to, like, if they don't have listings now, right? What advice would you give them to start getting listings?
I think the number one thing I did and what I would recommend is pick an area, start small. Pick an area that you know, because it's easier that way, that you know everything about. And if you don't know everything about it, learn everything about it. Because the one thing I find when someone walks into, uh, sometimes you're going to get your listing by somebody coming into a house and they like the house and then they want to list their house, is they want knowledge. And so what I did is I started in the town I lived in. So I knew a lot about it. I knew a lot about it, everything about it. And then what I did is I learned all the comps in the town, everything that was on, everything that sold, and even go back and see the trend. Because when you go on a listing, people want to know, sometimes they give you a ridiculous high price and you want to be able to tell them, well, prices to get that kind of a price was then, maybe now with COVID, you could get it now. But if you learn your product, that's the number one thing that is going to help you, whether it's a seller or a buyer. What I did after that is I started to market myself and brand yourself. So don't be afraid to spend a little money and get, I know everything is digital and Facebook and Instagram. I do all of that. I still do all the time a print something to my sphere, to my neighborhoods, and I get my face out there all the time. If it's once a month, if it's twice a month, if you can do only once every 2 months, but be consistent. If you do get a listing and you do sell something, market those statistics. And that's what I did. I just marketed everything I did and I was consistent. And if I didn't have anything, I went to the person I worked for and said, what can I advertise? Can I advertise something for you? Can I market something for you? But I did it on a consistent basis. So along with branding myself, I was trying to get you then learn the area. So no matter where you go and who you meet, if they want to talk real estate with you in that particular area, you're going to be someone they're going to say, wow, you know a lot about it. You'll be a good choice to list my house. And that's really how I started.
So Corey says letter mailing or postcards. What did you send out?
I do postcards, and I know you're all going to laugh at me, but I still do it because it's the best money bang for your buck. We have a local paper like here it's North Shore Today, Penny Saver, Trends, whatever it's called in your town. And I only do the front cover. Well, I'll do the back cover if I really have to. I splash on the front cover because if people don't read it, if they never go in the inside of that magazine, if they keep seeing your face, I always say sometimes in the beginning it's smoke and mirrors, it's perception. So if you keep putting on the front cover of something or a postcard and they're getting it, they go, wow, this person's doing a lot of business. They have no idea if you're doing the business. They have no idea really if it's your, but in the beginning, you have to give the perception. So if you're not on a team and you're doing it yourself, brand. And I think for me, if you want listings, you brand in the area you want to work. And that's what I did. And I still do it. And it's over 20 years. And even though with digital, I still do it.
What is the dinner menu?
So
Diner,
the diner
dinner.
menu, I did do that. That was pretty fun. In now with COVID, it really doesn't pay, but in the diner menu, you could take an ad out. You could take a full page. And so when they're flipping through breakfast to lunch, they see your smiling face. And I cannot even tell you how many calls I'd get. I'm having breakfast and here you are. You know, it's like, it's funny, you know, it's just another vehicle. Get creative. You know, some people are doing it in the drugstores with the hand sanitizer. You can have the picture of yourself up there. You know, you could do it on, you know, depending on what your budget is. When you're starting out, you're not going to have a big budget. I think doing like a penny saver kind of thing is the biggest, is the best resource, because in a postcard, you know, you're going to be charged per postcard, and something like a penny saver, it'll go to a whole town. So when I do, I just saw something on the chat. When I do postcards, I do every door direct. I'm doing that now too. But when I started, I was very specific, and I started in one area, and then, you know, you grow it, and then it starts to work, and then you add, and you get, you know, you learn more. And it's sort of like that little, you know, bubble, you know, you throw a pebble in the water and it's a little ring, and you just keep going and going until you get more and more. But start small and know everything about it. And that was the number one thing I remember people saying to me early on, is when they would come into an open house and say, I don't like this house, I would know what else was on. I could ask them if they saw it. I'd ask them if they wanted me to take them. I could compare the difference. Go take those tours. I know it's not easy to get in and out of houses right now, but take the tours and know what, you know what the town looks like. And you'd be surprised where you'd meet someone. I mean, I go into my doctor's office. There isn't a doctor I work that I go to that is not a client of mine. Like, start talking about real estate. I mean, my kids make fun of me everywhere I go. I talk about real estate, because I usually tell them, when they say, how are you? I go, exhausted. And I go, why? And I go, because I'm busy. And start the conversation, make it funny. And it's interesting, wherever you meet people, if you talk about it, they're going to ask you about real estate. So know not just the market and the interest rates, know like a particular town that you want to sell in. It's really important.
You know, Rachel just PM'd me, right? And just said, even my guidance counselor in high school was client of Fran's, right? So look, I want to pull a couple things before I jump off. Number one, know your product, know the inventory. Number two, know the areas that you're working. Number three, don't be shy to make an investment. And number four, for God's sakes, don't be in the witness protection program. Don't be a secret agent. People need to know what you do. Be proud and have your conversations planned. I'm exhausted. Exhausted for what? Fran has this line down between talking to her daughter, Rachel, Michael, her son, who's on here. They're like, you can't go anywhere with her down the street without 5 people talking to her. But that is what she's created, right? Thus is how the folk tale of Fran Mazer has begun. And now we know the story. Fran, thank you for sharing everything with us. We'll get you copies of all the materials. If you haven't checked it out, we've spotlighted Ethan, Angela, Fran. They have great interviews that Rachel has written. Make sure to go check those out. They all have tactical tips. And everyone stay on now for live role play with Ethan, which from what I'm told has been a hit. So thank you guys for showing up. Thank you, Fran, for being here.
You're so welcome.
We'll see you guys tomorrow. The rest of you guys stay on.
All right.